My name is Glenn Engelberg, and I am the Assistant Director of Recruitment for the GEM, or MS in Global Energy Management program. And before we begin here today, I want to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 situation with CU Denver, and just in general too, because obviously it's something that's on the top of all of our minds right now. As the Assistant Director of the Energy Management program at the business school, we've been directly impacted, like many of you have, with this. And even with the situation going on, we are having education continuing with our program, as well as many others too. The university's moved everyone remotely, staff, students, and faculty, for obvious safety reasons, but we are still committed to offering education during this time. And webinars like this, I truly believe, are a great way to not just break up the day, but also still really learn a little bit more in a different format. So we are also working on having some other online forums, maybe similar to this or a little different. Either way, I'd love to hear your feedback. So at the end of the presentation today, I'll go ahead and make sure to email everyone just to connect with you. And if you have any suggestions, ideas on topics or anything else, I'd love to hear it. And I know now more than ever, it's important for the energy community to remain connected, engaged, and informed. And that's really what this is all about. So just let me know. All right, now on to today's webcast. And really, with the growth of electricity demand, the rise of renewables, and it's now more critical than ever to understand how your skills transfer to other energy sectors. In this webcast, we're actually going to provide you with some tactical tips from energy professionals who've successfully done this transition, and can provide you with some skills and knowledge to take away and explore some other career opportunities, or potentially pivot to those too, just like they have in a couple different sectors. Our guest today will be Kathleen Stacks. She is the current executive in residence with the GEM program and the Director of External Affairs at Guzman Energy. And our other panelists will be Eric Van Orden. He is the Director of Sales and Business Development at Copper Labs, and one of our nearly 400 alumni as well, and we're very happy to have him today. They'll walk through the details of their energy story, about how they were able to transition to different sectors and pivot accordingly. Something as hiring managers that they are too, with being in a leadership position, what they look for, potential colleagues and employees that they're seeking, and really just understand more about the skill sets that you can transition, not just, let's say, vertically, but also horizontally. So from different energy sectors, from one to another, let's say renewables to oil and gas, but also, let's say, within the utility or oil and gas side, from working more in contract negotiations to the finance side or business development, just understanding how you can prepare yourself for all those different components and make yourself as energy resilient as possible. All right, so since everyone's knowledge of the GEM program is a little bit different, we're going to go ahead and start off by going over just a couple quick details of the program here, and then we'll have, of course, the main section of the webinar today with our discussion with Kathleen as well as Eric, and then we should have some time for Q&A afterwards as well. I know we've already even received a couple questions, and I believe we'll see a chat box on your screen, so feel free to jot those down. We'll get to as many as we can at the very end, and thank you so much again for joining us here today. Now, a little bit about the GEM program. This will only take a few minutes here before we get into the panel discussion. We're not just a master's program, even though it's what we are most well known for, but we also provide professional and public energy education too. So on the professional side, we do certain components with data analytics and big data, our life cycle of oil and gas course, and a few other things that help energy professionals for really professional work credit. We also, in the public energy space, are involved on many different forums, webinars, different conferences, and offer a couple free online classes too to go ahead and help continue energy education in many different formats. One quick note as well, I'm not sure if some of you have seen this, but actually Hart Energy has started to do an energy management rankings, just like US News and World Report has one for top, let's say, online MBAs or things like that. And actually in their first rankings of the top energy management programs in the US, the GEM program ranked #3, which we're really happy to see. That was in their February 2020 issue. So if you want any information on that, and there's some great articles on leadership there too, just ping me and I'll be happy to get that over to you. As far as the GEM program itself, really the best way to think about it is that it's a business and leadership degree for energy professionals. Everything that we teach, whether it's on the regulation, finance, project management side, is how does this work in the context of all energy spaces? And pretty much all of our students are working full-time, maybe transitioning to a different position, but they have a full-time schedule. Many of them have kids, all that good stuff. So they need a program that can work and balance that, but also keep their day job, so to speak. We also offer 2 graduate certificates in addition to our master's program as well. With of course, the exception of the April class here, because as I alluded to earlier, the CU systems and pretty much all college campuses are going online for the next at least 2 or 3 months. But after that, hopefully, in our fall classes and terms that we have here, we'll have what we normally do, which are cohort weekends. And essentially, this is a 4-day weekend that kicks off the term that you'll go ahead and have, where you can learn in person with your instructors, go over a lot of the harder concepts, get a better feel for the different energy professionals, because just about everyone works in the energy space that's in our program. We have some different social events, and executive in residence too is a great way to learn about leadership from someone who's been there and done that. And Kathleen is one of our executive in residence, our current one actually, and she'll talk probably a little bit more about that today. Really, it's just a chance to connect in person and get a foundation for the program. And the nice thing is, in about an 18-month period, you can go ahead and you only have to come here if you are coming out of state for about 2 days off every 3 months. So it's something that balances pretty well and allows our students to work full-time while doing the program, but still get some of that connectivity as well with the degree. Something else that we have here too with our faculty that I think a big differentiator is that they are all working full-time like many of our students are, but they're very ingrained in the energy space and usually have been for at least 20+ years. They understand the important concepts that are in the field now, and everything's very application-based with how it works in the future. So with our students here, it's not just what you're learning, but why is it important? How is it marketable? How's this going to help me with my current job or future positions? And one of the neat things too, with actually a quick story here, and then actually the next slide that we'll get to here in a minute or so will be with our panelists. But before that, actually, I know we have a student who will remain nameless, but a few months ago was in one of our accounting classes, and our instructor, Gary Hapkin, actually met with him each week to go over some different problem sets or concepts, because for the student, like many of ours, it was a while, right, before it was a while between his bachelor's and getting his master's. And I know they met every week, stayed very well connected, and even in true Colorado fashion too, the student, like many of ours, is very outdoor oriented, does like some hunting, other activities like that, would even, send Gary, some pictures. And I remember seeing one he showed me where he was actually brought his laptop with him to, when he was hunting. So between different, when things were a little slower, he'd go ahead, and do his work there, and then, can do his other activities. So there's creative ways to go ahead and balance that. And that's not Colorado. I don't know what is. I guess if he was skiing and had a Subaru too, that'd be even more. But all kidding aside, they really care. They're helping to groom the next level of energy professionals, whether it's online or in person. They're really committed to connecting with our students, during and even after the program. And just the online part too, with it, it's asynchronous. So with our students, this allows them to work while doing the program because it's deadline driven. And the nice thing is, during that first 4-day weekend, whether it may be virtual, like it will be here in April, or in person, that we really go over the foundation of what to expect and how to have a game plan around it, so you have the flexibility to do this while working as well. All right, now for our panelists here today that I'm very excited to introduce, we have Eric Van Orden and Kathleen Stacks, who I briefly mentioned. But before this, I want to do a quick poll with everyone, because today's about you. And I really want to know, and I know Kathleen and Eric want to really understand, what are the things you specifically want to learn about? Obviously, you're here today because some of the things that you saw for promoting the webinar are going to be discussed, but we want to go over a couple more details of that. So I'm actually going to send a poll to everyone right now. If you don't mind just taking a minute to read it, you can choose 2 answers, and this will just help guide our conversation a little bit today, just to ensure we talk about the most important concepts and themes that you care about. So I'll give everyone a moment here if you want to go ahead and take a look at this, and then I'll let everyone know when we'll transition to introducing our panelists. Thank you. All right, we got quite a lot of responses here. It's almost kind of like watching a horse race. No, it's kind of neck and neck that we see. All right, I'll give everyone about 20 more seconds. So looks like still a few are finishing up. All right, we're going to close the poll here, so to speak, in about 10 seconds, but it looks like learning how to transfer my skills to other energy sectors, along with understanding what skills hiring managers in the energy sector seek with candidates of other backgrounds, are a couple of the leaders, along with hearing about the currency of the energy economy, and try not to be too pigeonholed as well, too. So thank you to everyone for participating right there. And this is anonymous as well, too, just so you all know. With that. So I'll even share the results right here. You should be able to kind of see with that. And now, because I've done more than enough talking, I'm sure you want to go ahead and hear from our panelists directly. I'll go ahead and introduce Kathleen and then Eric. To both our panelists, if you don't mind, doing just a brief elevator pitch, or elevator intro, so to speak, about yourself, your involvement with the energy field, and maybe about some of the work that you do. I'm sure everyone would love to hear that. And Kathleen, why don't we go ahead and start with you first? So I'll give you the floor.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Glenn. And hi, everyone from my bedroom and to your bedrooms, I'm sure. Glenn and I were chatting earlier about how many people are actually wearing pants. So hopefully it's a high percentage.
At least the 3 panelists here, so you don't have to worry about that.
So I'm Kathleen Stacks. I was telling Glenn too, this last Friday was actually my last day at Guzman Energy. I'm going to be taking some time to find another role more in a leadership position. I'm in the meantime though going to continue to do some consulting and advising with Guzman Energy, mainly in the same sort of sphere that I've been working on, particularly related to policy and communications and government relations and sort of all things external affairs. So looking at a transition myself, and I'm kind of really excited. Throughout my career, I've taken quite a few totally different directions. When I moved out to Colorado in 2003 to go to law school, started my career after law school working in land conservation, shifted a little bit more broadly into natural resources and land use, and then in 2014, joined the Department of Natural Resources with the state as the Assistant Director for Energy and Minerals, and was doing at that point about 95% oil and gas policy and about 5% mining, working with the regulatory agencies at the state. And really, I think one of the things that was truly beneficial to my experience at that time was building relationships with people both in the oil and gas and mining sectors, as well as the environmental community, the advocacy community, local governments, really everybody who kind of touches these sectors, which is a lot of people. And so from there, I shifted over to run the energy office for the state in 2017. I was there for 2 years, totally different kind of energy focus, really much more on the energy efficiency and sort of alternative fuel transportation. But really what I was trying to do was find a way for the energy office to work well with all of the energy sectors that we have in the state, which, as you all probably are well aware, we have almost all of them. So really diverse energy industry in Colorado, and trying to find a way to sort of connect them all and make sure that we were engaging meaningfully with people in all the sectors. And so I was there for 2 years and then joined Guzman Energy in January of 2019, where I started focusing, it's more on the utility side of things. Guzman Energy is a wholesale power provider that works with rural communities to help transition into a more renewable age, which is significant because the utility sector doesn't change very quickly. That's been something sort of a disruptive force in the utility sector. really across the country. So it's been a fantastic experience. And then during this current semester, I've been the executive in residence for the GEM program and have had the opportunity to come and speak with a bunch of the classes and interact with students. And it has been a fantastic experience, and I'll sort of set it aside so we can chat more about that in a bit.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kathleen. And I know Eric knows a thing or two about the pace of utilities, and I know he'll share that a little bit here today. So, Eric, if you want to just say a few words about yourself, a quick introduction, everyone, and then we'll go to our first question here.
Sure. Thanks, Glenn, and hello, everybody. My name is Eric Van Orden, and I graduated from GEM in about 2013 as part of cohort 7. And since then, I believe they're on cohort 21, 2, with certainly a lot of alumni, 400 co-students and co-graduates that I certainly have been keeping in touch with my friends from my cohort, and making some good connections with the folks in other cohorts. So that's been a great network with the GEM folks. As far as kind of getting involved with GEM, I started my career in renewables about probably 15 years ago now, mostly on the sales and marketing side for solar installations and then energy efficiency work. And one of my main goals really was to kind of pivot, or at least just get a better understanding of the broader world of energy, because it's certainly, while renewables are a big piece of it, there's a lot more to it. And that was exactly what GEM helped me do, to learn a lot from the staff, from the professors, and from my colleagues in the program. And just before graduating from GEM, I got a job at Xcel Energy and put that to use, both with running and kind of figuring out Xcel Energy's electric vehicle strategy, and then also natural gas vehicle strategy. And those were both kind of bridging the certainly new technologies, but two different fuel sources and fuel types. And also was something that I worked on specifically in a couple of classes. One of it was a main project on electric vehicles, and another was just a group project that we worked on together, where we kind of asked ourselves, if we were a natural gas producer and wanted to sell more natural gas, what would we do? And the concept and answer at that point in time was promote natural gas vehicles in that new market. Some things have evolved in the transportation market since then, and you can argue if that's the right path to take, but that was a good 6 or 7 years ago now. But was just a little taste of what we did in the GEM program, and also how that truly did translate to my day-to-day work, where I was asking myself and my colleagues at Xcel Energy, we sell natural gas, we sell electricity, but is there something more that we should be doing in that space for this new transportation sector, or evolving transportation sector? And more recently, I left Xcel Energy after spending about 7 years there with the strategy efforts and also running renewable energy programs from a customer operations side of things, and have moved over to Copper Labs, which provides solutions for both energy consumers and really targeted towards utilities for managing energy usage based on the demand side, by providing real-time wireless energy monitoring solutions. That's certainly an energy industry focus, but also for me is some further exploration and work in kind of the software hardware space that I didn't have before.
Great. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well, too, Eric, in terms of just the data analysis, the software space. I know it's a huge growing field in all energy spaces. So, all right, well, thank you both again to our panelists here today. As a caveat as well, too, if you happen to see a little cat running around or something like that, remember we all are at home. So Maddie and Taylor are friendly. They're not vicious at all, so don't worry about them if you see them there. All right, anyways, well, this question's actually for both Kathleen and Eric. And Kathleen, why don't we start with you here? Since you both work, in leadership roles and have experience there, I want you to go ahead and put your hiring hat on if you can for a second, and just think about, what are the most important soft skills that you look for when speaking with a prospective job candidate, and just that you're looking for one? And let's say specifically they don't have experience in that particular sector. Is there something in particular that you look for that translates for them? So just kind of some insight on that. I'm sure it's something that the audience would love to hear. So Kathleen, why don't we hear you first?
Sure. So I tell people this a lot. My career has not really gone in a very straight line, and I find myself going into sectors that I don't really know anything about the subject matter. And so I'm sort of the perfect example of, it can be done. You can learn you can learn a new subject matter, but the skills are really important. And I think one of the things that I want to have in people that I'm working with, and that have things that have been really successful for me, are the ability to listen. And these are really hard things actually to put on a resume too. So this is kind of the tricky piece. But I think the ability to listen and the willingness to answer questions, and I think or ask questions. And I think that being able to demonstrate on your resume when you have taken on something new, and what process that you've gone through to learn the subject matter that you need to know to be able to work successfully in a certain area. That's really important to me, because I think it's being able to communicate some of these really hard and complicated concepts that our technical professionals work through all the time, and be able to translate those into something that the general public can understand. It's really important, because every person at every company is an ambassador for that company. And as many of those who work in oil and gas know, talking about the things that you do is really important to help people understand why these things are so important and how energy is so integrated into our lives. And so I think communication skills, writing skills, which are becoming more and more rare, those are things that are really going to be unique and stand out. And then I think really being able to work on a team, but being kind of a self-starter. So I think for me, my management style is really empowering people to thrive in the space that they're in. I'm not the expert on most things, frankly, and I'm going to rely on the people around me to be the expert and to inform me. And so I think being a self-starter is a really important piece, but also, again, being willing to work with others and build a team around them when you don't know the answers to the questions. Never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just a couple quick caveats from that too. And there was some really great feedback there, Kathleen. The first is I saw we have a few questions here, and actually, I guess great minds think alike, because the questions we have in the Q&A are things we are going to be talking about today. So don't worry, we'll address those. And secondly, something that you said, actually before we have you comment here in a second, Eric, Kathleen, something that you said I'd love to hear a little more about was that when you're looking at resumes, let's say of someone who doesn't have that specific experience, but they've done something as far as like a transferable skill or problem solving to show that ability. I hate to put you on the spot, but if you can, like, is there a specific example that you can think of, or maybe just elaborate on, or at least just like maybe elaborate on that a little more about what you mean? Because I think that's a really important point.
So I'll give you an example. So when I joined the state and was working at the Department of Natural Resources, I came in with almost no oil and gas experience and had to spend a lot of time sitting and in meetings and frankly starting off listening. And so on my resume, I've tried to find a way to essentially frame this: I came in with no knowledge, here's the process I went through to get a workable understanding of the topics. And so it was everything from sitting in meetings and just listening, and then following up with some of the experts specifically in one-on-one and having them kind of explain things to me. And I always like to tell my engineering friends, teach me as if I'm a kindergartner. And I'd go through the whole thing, and then I'd be like, all right, start over. I didn't understand any of that. So it was,
or at least third grade level. Don't be modest.
Absolutely. Well, maybe. But I think when I think about a resume and how you convey these kinds of things, it's really about identifying the skill and then describing an experience and what you've done. Because I think sometimes the leading with the experience is harder to translate from one sector to another, particularly if you're trying to change. So it's really leading with that skill and demonstrating something, the process that you went through is really going to be transferable from one sector to another, because the way we're learning these topics, the topic actually doesn't really matter. It's just the process that you're going through and how you get yourself to having a workable set of knowledge in this area.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point, and kind of laying it out there too, and just demonstrate that capability from the get-go, because the infrastructure, a lot of energy systems are pretty similar. Just then it's like no knowledge, everything else in terms of acumen and connecting the dots. So
Absolutely.
That's a great point. Eric, well, we didn't forget about you, I promise. So, Eric, if you don't mind shedding some insight on this topic with some of the soft skills in particular that you look for, and if they don't have experience in that specific energy sector, maybe what are some of the things when sorting through resumes or talking with candidates that you look for to kind of help them stand out?
Sure, yeah, I definitely don't think that experience in the energy sector is needed to work in the energy sector, and maybe more than ever because it is changing and evolving, and some fresh ideas can help and some new perspectives. That said, I think kind of piggybacking on Kathleen's sentiment about teach me as if I'm a kindergartner, I do think there's some things that can translate from sector to sector, and it really is just the skills and the capabilities, and just thinking of as an example is communications. If you're working in, whether it's stakeholders or with customers in oil and gas or even in another industry, that goes across the board and across industries. And in many cases, while the energy business is a technical field, you can tap on those experts and the engineers in that space, but ultimately it might need some work by communications and marketing folks to simplify that information and make it more digestible while also not missing the point. So that's just kind of one example of a skill, not necessarily a sector. The other thing I think, thinking of more sector to sector jumping, is when I went to London they have a global energy management trip to London, I met with a handful of leading energy companies and associations, in particular Shell and BP. And Shell and BP and other energy companies have been kind of back and forth between being an energy, holistic, broad energy company and then really focusing in on just their oil and gas efforts. But I do think the broad energy kind of sentiment from some of these majors will stick for the foreseeable future. But their explanation at that point in time, and may still hold true, is that whether they're developing and finding resources under the ground or developing and harvesting wind or solar energy above ground, it all has an aspect of land, permitting, large infrastructure, engineering, and more. So there are different businesses and different components of the sector that do translate from a skills perspective and also just the scope of work that they do. When all is said and done, like I said, it's the skills and competencies that is really calling attention to how that translates, not necessarily the subject matter expertise on a specific energy segment. And really kind of the squishy soft skills I look for is really just passion and willingness to learn in our space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's an interesting point too as well. I know I heard from one of the students who came back on the trip recently, and they said it was just such a different approach on meeting with some of the executives with BP and S&P and Chevron in London versus DC. And, their approach going carbon neutral and some of the other terms and just strategy they have. So, but no, I think that's important too, is the passion, as you mentioned, and there are certain things you can do to kind of help overcome that, let's say, kind of quote unquote lack of experience, with that. So I think that's some great feedback there too. Well, actually, the next question, Kathleen, I'd love to begin with you here. I know you worked under Hickenlooper at the Colorado Office of Energy for a couple of years and have experience working with a lot of oil and gas professionals. And with the GEM program, I'd say about 60%, give or take, of our students to work in that sector. So it's a tenuous time there right now, with multiple levels, of different things going on. What advice would you give to someone who has, let's say, maybe almost all of their experience in oil and gas, and they're a little bit concerned about being kind of pigeonholed, just that part of the energy sector? And what are things that they can do, whether it be on their resume, LinkedIn profile, those things, to kind of appeal to maybe job opportunities and some other energy markets, or even maybe change, as mentioned, horizontally too, like going from more like the land side to project development, something like that, so to speak. So.
Sure. I mean, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of this in the coming years, and I actually think that one of the great things about the GEM program and actually many other institutions that work in this space, you're seeing a lot more opportunities that are energy wide and not just specific energy sector driven. So you see less and less sort of specific oil and gas events and less specific renewable energy events. You're seeing much more integrated energy things. And I think that's really good for the professionals who are looking to sort of transfer between the individual sectors within energy. And I think going to as many of those kinds of things as possible, because really what it's going to come down to is networking and having people, building trust and having people know who you are and what you bring to the table is going to be really valuable. And so I would encourage people to go and get involved in some of these broader energy type groups or events, and or even just attend and talk to people in other sectors and get a feel for what their day-to-day looks like. You know, taking advantage of the professors that you have in the GEM program, for example. You've got a lot of varied experience and a lot of really good insight and input. And everybody that I've met so far has really been more than willing to share their time and their insight with everybody. So I think that's really, I think, going to be my main suggestion. Again, it's all about focusing on these skills, but I think really truly going out and meeting as many people. And for those, and I know that's not the most comfortable thing for everyone too. And if that is the case, right,
yeah, I know, right? It's all about timing with that, but
right, I know. It's so I'm doing. I
there's
actually
ways to be connected though too, now more than ever, which I think
right.
is good news, right? If this happened 30 years ago, if you don't mind me interjecting,
No,
with that, you know, whether it's like for example, I'm the education advisor for YPE, Young Professionals Energy. They're from all different fields. Women's Energy Network, something that I know our executive director Sarah is very involved with on their board. There's a lot of organizations that are not just one specific energy field.
right.
And I think that's something to look forward to. And for anyone here who's attending today, I'm just, you know, as part of my role, I connect with a lot of these energy organizations, go to a lot of events with that. So if you wanted to know a list of someone to reach out to, email me directly afterwards. I'd be happy to go ahead and connect you with someone there, or at least just give you a list of some of them too, because when things eventually do calm down, and they will, you know, not just in, you know, the economically, but health-wise with everything, there's almost always an event a day, right? I mean, if you really want to, you could probably eat and drink your way just by going to these events. I don't recommend that, but I'm saying, yeah. But there's literally almost one every single day. Yeah. And they're always looking for volunteers too. A lot of them do some really great things you can feel good about as well, helping those that are underprivileged or underserved. So no, I think absolutely that's a great idea as far as, you know, immersing yourself and getting a little bit outside of your comfort zone too, you know, with it.
If you're not comfortable in some of these larger settings, there are lots of people, again, who would be happy to meet and have a conversation, a phone call, a coffee. I'm always willing to meet with anybody who just wants to sort of talk about what's going on in the energy sector or job-specific stuff. And there's a lot of people who are willing to do that. And so if you're more comfortable with sort of a one-on-one setting, I think, you know, attending some of these groups, looking at even the attendee list and reaching out via LinkedIn, I think is a really valuable way to connect with people who are doing something that may sound interesting to you as you're looking to explore something different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Eric, I guess on that note as well too, if you want to talk about this, to know with your experience at the GEM program, you worked with many and studied with many students who had oil and gas backgrounds, and maybe they kind of faced a similar position where they just didn't want to be pigeonholed like any of us into any particular thing. What advice would you give them as far as exploring other opportunities in different sectors and what they can do to kind of maybe appeal to some other markets too?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the networking definitely is something that is super valuable. I think GEM and the growing alumni network is something, like I said, that I've been tapping into just to see what's going on, make those connections, maybe help some others, and also help myself at the same time. Certainly, kind of opportunities like this, I'm trying to answer the questions that are coming in through the chat. So hello to those that are doing that, and also hello to some of my GEM cohort colleagues that are texting me to make sure I have my pants on.
Yeah, and just to let everyone know too, also if you don't mind interjecting for a second, assuming that everyone can stay for a little bit as well, we will have some time to designate towards those specific questions as well with that too. So we will try to go ahead and get to everyone with that too. So, but yeah, as you were saying, okay, regarding pants on, and I know talking about just like the networking piece there, we left off.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information and so many different channels to get it. And certainly whether that's online, whether it's through direct conversations, one-on-one, through continuing education. I think in my experience, folks are really open to have a conversation just to compare notes. And I think it does in this time of kind of uncertainty, both right now in this immediate term, as well as knowing that the energy industry is evolving. I think we know where it's going, but how to get there, there's a lot of questions there. And so It's going to take some collaboration and conversations both to move the energy industry where it needs to go and continue to thrive, but also individual decisions and conversations. So I think don't be shy to reach out, and certainly the different platforms of LinkedIn, educational, volunteering helps to get out there.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I think volunteering is a very underrated aspect at many levels, but especially there's never enough, right? And especially time like now, depending on, how comfortable you are, or like they're 6 feet apart and everything, but there's other ways even virtually too, to help give your time and connect with others. So, well, actually now I want to shift a little bit to the U.S. power generation mix. I know it's been a big topic just in the energy sector in general. And Kathleen, I'd love you to kind of start our conversation with this particular topic. So, with your experience just in the utility side, how do you anticipate the mix of the U.S. power generation changing over, let's say, the next decade or so? And what do you think that means for job opportunities for those looking to shift energy sectors or maybe kind of move more towards the power gen side of the energy field?
I think, most of what I'm going to say is going to come as a surprise to no one. We've seen my bold prediction, we've seen our last coal plant built in the country. So we're only going to see that continue to decline. And I think that's going to decline pretty quickly. We had even, there are most of the coal plants within Colorado have been scheduled to close by 2030. There's still a few out there, but I think I would expect to see announcements in the coming years as we look at resource planning and we look at the economics related to particularly new renewable energy. I think natural gas, we're going to continue to see as a really big part of our generation mix. Where we see new natural gas generation being built is, I think, going to be an uninteresting question. Right now in Colorado, new gas generation is, I think, highly questionable. I'm not sure we're actually going to get to see anymore. I've had conversations with some who've said we have all of the natural gas generation we need within Colorado. The thing that makes it tricky here is that we don't have an organized market. So utilities, for example, like Guzman Energy, cannot access excess gas that's out on the system that Xcel or Black Hills or Tri-State may own that they're not using. Capacity is going to continue to be a really big question as we're seeing some of these fossil fuel resources come offline. How you meet the needs for when the sun isn't shining and when the wind isn't blowing. I think we've got really big questions about that across the country. But I think there's, battery storage is continuing to grow. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to see across the country related to generation is transmission. And that is, going back to what Eric said about land use, these are challenges that are going to continue to grow because building new transmission is really, really hard, particularly at the local level when you're talking about permitting across private land, across state land, across federal land. These hurdles are enormous. And I think the challenges in building new transmission are probably going to have a pretty significant influence on what our generation mix looks like into the future. And by mix, I even mean utility scale versus distributed. I think because of some of the challenges that we're going to see related to transmission, I would expect to see more distributed energy in smaller places, in more local projects, just so that the need to build more transmission can decrease. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of drives the future mix over the next decade.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. Well, there's definitely a lot there. I'm sure Eric would love to comment on that too. So just the same question as a quick reminder, with your experience the utility side, Eric, I know with Xcel Energy as well, like how do you anticipate the U.S. power generation mix changing over the next decade and what that means maybe for some potential job opportunities in other sectors and what that balance will look like?
Sure. So I think, oil and gas is a critical part of our energy system for supplying energy, but also for consumer products, just thinking of plastic and petrochemicals. So I see that continuing for many years and decades to come. But from the pure kind of electric or utility side, without a doubt, I do anticipate more wind and solar. Maybe we'll see some retrofitting of existing hydro plants for more capacity. for a clean energy solution there. Maybe some micro hydro, but I think kind of one of the big known unknowns, as we referenced and talked about a bit in one of our GEM strategy classes, is we know nuclear power is out there, but the unknown is, will kind of society and politics support either continuing existing nuclear power plants or the construction of new nuclear power plants. But that is a clean energy solution that can drive us and our economy to where it needs to go. The other kind of big unknown is really what kind of other technologies are coming. Working at Xcel Energy, they committed to 100% renewable or 100% clean energy by 2050, with 80% clean energy by 2030. But that remaining 20%, the utility and the company doesn't know how to get there. And you know, a lot of folks point to renewables and wind and solar, but operationally there's some challenges with that. Certainly batteries may be a component there, but there's a need for longer term either storage or longer term firm energy, or also just the clean use of existing fossil fuels. There's their way to kind of clean up the smokestack from them. So those types of things require really smart engineers, an entrepreneurial spirit to problem solve, and leaders to build and manage new opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on a personal note, even though I haven't seen the entire series, I am wholeheartedly convinced that the Chernobyl series in HBO set nuclear back at least 10 years in the public perception of that. But no, I think that's a really interesting kind of forecast on it and mixed with that. And actually on that note too, Eric, just if to kind of piggyback on that, with the demand of electricity growth, you know, impacting the sector continues to increase on many levels, how do you anticipate major differences, or maybe do you, for Colorado versus the U.S. as a whole in terms just the demand of electricity growth and that impact on the energy sector as a whole?
Sure. So, I mean, after years and decades of either economic growth or growth of energy demand and somewhat from cooling, we're seeing it flatline a bit, both in Colorado and across the country, but it's not declining here in Colorado. It's more just kind of flattening. It's to be determined how electric vehicles will play into the electric demand, but certainly electric vehicles are coming. But I'd say as far as jobs go, certainly the electric demand and the actual kilowatt hours and the commodities being used and the natural resources to produce it, that's certainly a piece of the jobs, but not all of it. And I say that in part because you know, we continue to need electric for our homes, businesses, our gadgets, and our servers, and increasingly, like I said, transportation. That I don't think, certainly electric demand isn't going away by any means. That's just how it's supplied. And that's kind of the other piece of, from a jobs perspective, it's just evolving, maybe into less large central construction of power plants. Maybe it is more kind of getting the most from wind farms, and it will require some of that transmission to get to the places where there is energy demand specifically. But the other is also just kind of a decoupling, not just of energy usage and sales, but also kind of decoupling of the job scope and the energy demand, meaning, you know, traditionally, I think we were working on the supply side of energy and the delivery of it. But now increasingly we may be looking at the energy management side of things from the demand side, and engaging customers and using and communicating with end use devices to align the two, of the supply and the demand, a little more. And at the end of the day, maybe it's less kilowatt hours being produced, but still the same work that goes into making sure that our lights stay on and stay reliable and also stay affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathleen, I love about little of your feedback on this too. But I think we're seeing now more than ever too, with different software and just the advancement of a lot of technologies, that there's more real-time energy data to help inform and empower consumers. You know that, right, Eric, of what you were talking about. So getting more insight on energy usage there and how that impacts the utility structure. And of course, when you think of utilities, you know, reliability, dependability, and regulation, right, with that. So I guess kind of speaking on that side, Kathleen, you have a really unique background with having your JD as well as your experience under Hickenlooper at the Colorado Energy Office. So do you have, what do you think, or I guess, you know, and I know there's been a ton of change, regulation policy in many different sectors, especially oil and gas. but what major changes do you see happening in the next few years in Colorado and on a national scale that energy professionals can be prepared for on the regulation front?
Well, I think even more on the policy side maybe than the regulatory side, although there could be ultimately some overlap. I think, and sort of building on what Eric was talking about, the beneficial electrification in the building sector and the industrial sector, I think there's a lot of policy priorities around the electrification of additional sectors, and trying to clean those up. And I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity because we don't know how to do it yet. I think there's going to be both opportunity on the R&D and entrepreneurial side, and then there's also going to be opportunity on the sort of the trade and vocational side of things as well, because you're going to need people to go in and install different kinds of equipment and building more of these smaller projects. So I think you're going to start to see some opportunities in that space. On the regulatory side, I think the oil and gas side of it, we've seen so much driven by local governments. I have a lot of hope that with 181 passing last year in Colorado, that gave local governments more ability to regulate oil and gas operations at the local level, that will spend some time in that space and be able to figure out how we operate within that new regulatory system rather than continuing to pile on. I think we're going to be seeing, particularly, with the economy the way it is and moving so quickly, companies are going to be coming and going, and I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in this space. But I think the companies that are still operating here and really, across the country are going to continue to be doing things better. Their best practices are going to continue to improve. Their interactions with communities are going to continue to improve, because we're not in a position to not use those products yet. And until we get closer to that, point, and that goes way beyond the electricity sector, I think we'll see a decline in the electricity sector when it comes to fossil fuel products way faster than we will anything else. But I think there's still some uncertainty on the regulatory side of that. I think the other thing we're seeing, at least locally in Colorado on the electricity sector when it comes to regulation, is this need for a regional market for energy and electricity, and how that looks and what, how you structure it, because the state can't actually require the utilities to join an RTO, a regional transmission organization, or an energy imbalance market. But the state can certainly, incentivize or, create some challenges that sort of make people want to go in that direction, which I think will help benefit the rest of the state. I think getting engaged in the policy arena for people in the energy sector, helping organizations like the Metro Chamber and like Club 20 and Action 22 and these advocacy groups understand the benefit of the energy sector to their communities. They're the ones who are showing up at the Capitol every day and making arguments and trying to make sure that we've got a healthy business environment in the state, which is really important. And I think that's going to be a really important way for people across the energy sector to get engaged and to help people understand and influence the direction that we're going, because we're not ready to just turn it all off. We're not ready as an electricity sector. We're not ready as an energy sector more broadly. And so I think those are some places that I would encourage people to get involved. And if they're not comfortable showing up at the Capitol and testifying at a legislative committee, which I'm not sure I recommend, but there are entities who are doing that, and I would encourage people to get engaged there.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point on a couple fronts, and even just even though, and I completely agree with your point. Actually, Chris Hansen, who, for those that may or may not know him, writes a lot of energy policy and is one of the state senators at the Capitol. And even he mentioned about a year ago, he's like, the last coal power plant, was built in 2018, and there probably will never be another one again. But we still almost have half our power, on the electricity side, almost 45, 50%, if I'm not mistaken, still from that. So there's still a transition of getting those plants, maybe natural gas, cleaning burning ones, and and stuff that we'll still, really need a lot of our fossil fuels for. And, luckily we're doing a lot more cleaner, more efficient, and better ways. But yeah, it can be a struggle, especially the policy side and different areas, and counties with those two. So well, actually, Eric, something I want to touch on, and actually we're going to have, we have a couple questions about the coronavirus and that impact too. So we will get to that here in a second. But before that, Eric, I know with the increase in data software companies that are in the energy sector, what kind of job market do you think specifically will be out there for energy professionals who maybe want to shift or pivot to that space on the data side? And do you have any advice in particular of how maybe kind of particular skill sets that can appeal to those that are hiring the data software side of energy?
Sure, certainly. I mean, I think the oil and gas industry has done pretty well over the past couple of years, if not decades, with data, whether it's for an engineering purposes or for environmental management and things of that nature. But there's always more to do. I do think the utility sector's getting there. And before I left Excel Energy, the company or the department had a skills assessment. And going through that questionnaire of different skills that was for all of our department, I checked off a handful of boxes that were related to my skills, but there was also a bunch of gibberish to me, very software and data security oriented. And like I said, it was frankly new to me, but certainly was a sign that they were looking either to understand, does the company have those skills? Will they need to fill them in anticipation of needing them? While I didn't have them all, I think what I did and otherwise kind of thought of was just trying to bridge the gap and figure out, okay, how does project management or people management or even just my willingness to learn help to get towards that? And I think some of that's kind of both the soft and the hard skills to translate, but absolutely there's going to be more data and software. It was something personally I was looking for. I'm certainly excited about the opportunities and the solutions that Copper Labs provides, but also for me personally, I do have an information technology certificate in undergrad, but the space of data has changed and evolved quite a bit. And so I anticipate a lot more of that. And I think the other piece of it from a GEM perspective is, and even your own career is where do you want to play a role? One of the professors said, I'm here to help you get bumped up and boost yourself to the C-suite. And that may be a path you want to take. And to that end, you don't have to know all the details and learn the content and the subject matter yourself. It's really kind of understanding more the why and the strategy behind it. And then, yeah, at the other end of things is do you want to be deep into the data and software? And I know some of my colleagues from GEM have done both, been kind of more in the leadership positions as well as become computer scientist experts.
Yeah, no, that's something that we see too. We have a lot of students who have engineering backgrounds and the technical acumen and kind of learning to eventually segue that to more like the business side too. And almost, as I like to say, just enough to be dangerous, right? On the big picture level, regulation and all those sectors too. So actually with COVID-19 and the coronavirus here as well, we got a couple questions on it. I know in the poll we had, that was one of the top three vote getters, so to speak, with that topic. Why don't we go with you first, Kathleen, for this? Is there any just general advice for what you've seen right now going on for those that are maybe worried about their jobs or want to make themselves more marketable if, God forbid, they get let go or laid off? What are some things that, besides trying to get connected with other energy organizations and communities, what are some things energy professionals can do right now to go ahead and kind of armor themselves, I guess that, so to speak?
I think it's tricky. I mean, I think there's so much volatility, and I think those who are thinking about changing sectors and trying to find something more stable potentially than the oil and gas industry right now, I'm not sure my recommendation is to just jump ship immediately, because I think, again, we're going to continue to need these industries and these products. And so, one of the things that I always recommend, regardless of the sort of time period, is go try something different within your company. Go ask people, learn something new within the company that you're doing. So one of the examples I'll give, we had at Guzman, we've got a legal team of 3 lawyers, and one of our newest law graduates. He's been out of law school for about a year and a half now, I think. He was working on some kind of technical something related to transmission queues, and he was like, this isn't exactly legal. It wasn't exactly what I thought I was going to be doing. He said, but I realized that when it comes to sort of law graduates at his same, sort of experience level who are interested in working in energy, he is building up a whole bunch of different knowledge and skills than anybody else who is working in this sector may actually have the opportunity to learn. So I think taking this opportunity to potentially learn something different within the company that you're working in, or looking to see what other kind of opportunities there are, just to work on something different and increase your skills and knowledge in a different area. Whether or not you end up changing jobs or you end up doing something different or changing sectors, whatever the future is, you're always going to benefit by sort of challenging yourself to learn new things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I'd love to hear your feedback on this in a second, Eric, but just I hate to do, that cheesy NBC, the more you know, that I used to have that, but especially with a lot of, let's say, Guzman, maybe smaller organizations where, and not saying this is happening with Guzman, but if a few people have to be, laid off, or more people, or they can't hire as many at the current moment, they need people who can go ahead and understand how a lot of different parts work together. It's never a bad thing, even if you don't want to pursue that, to understand how that works in the bigger picture, right? And especially while you're with that company, and I can't imagine anyone being like, oh, no, we don't want you to learn any more about how to do your job more efficiently, or another one, right? I think that's a really great point. You need to ask, right? I think that too, whether it's your the HR personnel, your director, supervisor, I think that's a really great point. So, Eric, on the same question too, is there any particular advice you have for those just kind of going through the volatility of the coronavirus situation, everything right now, of what they can do to kind of armor themselves or try to make themselves more marketable in general, if something maybe does happen to the careers?
Sure. I mean, this still has yet to be proven out and is very early yet, but I have this sense that certainly in my career, I've thought about where I need to be geographically. And personally, I love Colorado. I know there are folks that participate in the GEM program that are across the nation and also across the world, and they have roots there and maybe don't want to chase down the job for doing that. That said, I know others do move for job purposes, but I think as far as if there is concern or just kind of anticipating what might come in the future, both of the industry, the economy, and maybe even our work, is us getting more comfortable with working remotely, and maybe not as individuals, but also corporations that maybe just weren't there yet. And I do think the next couple of weeks might give this a little jump start and put a little different perspective and maybe even a little more flexibility depending on your job. Certainly there are times and jobs that require being out in the field or working with customers. But in other cases, there may be some more flexibility that allows folks to do the work and their expertise that they have or want to learn and share that locally or share that afar. And so I'm optimistic that will provide some flexibility in turbulent times.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too. I mean, just personally, I've worked remotely a few times, but just like maybe on a 1 or 2 day off kind of thing, and it's a whole different animal. Just doing that, with my wife, 2 fur babies, our cats, everything else, just trying to manage that. I'm curious, Eric, like, have you worked from home for like long stints at a time, or is this kind of new for you as well?
No, frankly, I've worked from home for maybe a day or 2 here and there, but I do like and some of the culture of companies I've worked for in the past was being in the office. There was a lot of interaction, there were a lot of conversations, and that was just kind of the culture. It will be an interesting test to see if that can continue, and you still get the same things done by video conference and other things over the next couple of weeks. But no, I'm generally not a work from home type person. I like to be in the office, kind of feeling the buzz a little bit, and being able to kind of spin around and go run down the hallway or something like that, and ask somebody what's going on. I do know also, kind of thinking of the energy industry, utilities in particular, there's a wide range of demographics and also age groups that work at utilities, and certainly kind of thinking the people that you work with. Some really wanted to work in person and meet if you wanted to get some things done. Others were more flexible, and I think kind of thinking if that was always something just to get things going as a professional was something that was considered, but also, again, kind of thinking where things are going and the value of that flexibility of working from home versus being in person may evolve and get a little shot in the arm to have more remote work in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just out of respect to everyone's time as well, too, actually, those are all the questions that we initially have here today. However, Eric and Kathleen, if you have a few extra minutes, I know I have 3 or 4 questions that were from the audience that I'd be happy to go over with you, so we can share them with everyone, of course, anonymously, but at least answer, because I think they are very relevant to a lot of people. But for those that have to go, I just want to thank you so much for joining us here today, and to Eric and Kathleen for offering all their knowledge and insight as well. It's been great. So well, I guess on to a couple of the questions that we have here from the audience. One was actually on LinkedIn, and Kathleen, I know you mentioned something on that too. I guess to kind of paraphrase, someone's like, asked along the lines of, does it really work? And I think what they mean is maybe more like, how do you go about it? Because obviously there's no magic formula. Even if you do well, you still have to meet in person, right? And eventually everything else to kind of secure that. But do you have any specific advice as far as if someone's reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, or things that they can do in that format to maybe be more appealing that way?
I think when you are sort of cold reaching out to somebody, I think the more sort of background that you can give them to know who they're sort of, why you're reaching out, that's helpful. When I just get like a, hey, I'd like to connect, I don't tend to respond to those as much as I would somebody who says, I saw you do this thing, or somebody recommended that I reach out, or talking about what that connection, where that connection came from, and what you're interested in learning. You can always set up a phone call. You don't always have to meet in person initially if that's not something that you're comfortable with. But I think giving a little bit of context to people that you're reaching out to is really valuable. It has been, I think, sort of the go-to networking, online networking platform at this point in time. And if you're not on LinkedIn as a professional, you should be. I don't know, personally, I'm not exactly sure how it works necessarily as far as searching for a job, but from the networking standpoint, I think it's a really important and easy way to connect with essentially anybody that you could find working in whatever sector you can dream of.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, do you have any feedback on that same topic as well, just as far as do's or don'ts for reaching out on LinkedIn, or certain things that you've seen that that you thought, oh, well, this was a really interesting way to reach out, or I would definitely use this if I was in a similar position, kind of thing?
Sure. I think even just as far as using LinkedIn in general, I do think it's kind of a baseline, and I would strongly suggest that if you're not on LinkedIn to at least have some sort of presence there. And I think it is firsthand and otherwise just kind of general experience. I think it's increasingly, for better or for worse, being used as in place of, or to complement looking for and making calls to references. You do kind of take a look either when you see a resume or after an interview, and kind of see where they play in the space, and do they have a presence either with a network, or do they have a presence of just being active and being a thought leader. There's some, again, pros and cons of being overly active in posts and things like that. But I do think it's basically critical to have at least kind of your basic information, a little bit of your career on there, to have a presence both there and online in general. As far as reaching out, yeah, I think just try to make it relevant and targeted. That way you do get some positive responses. The kind of the mass outreaches, I guess it's sometimes can be a numbers game, but at the same time, you might turn some folks off.
Yeah, no, and I think actually just a point too as well, because I've been involved in some hiring committees, involved in a lot of those components. I can tell you that the first thing that someone looks at almost as a default is if they see something like, oh, this seems interesting, or if they're at a network event, let me check their LinkedIn profile. They're not going to MySpace, Facebook, everything's virtual now, and especially, let's be honest, in this format that we're in right now, it's got to be kind of virtual that way. So one recommendation I'd have in general too is be smart about it, especially with elections and stuff coming up. I know this can be a touchy topic, but even if you have an opinion that sways strongly one way or the other, just think about the space that you are expressing that opinion in, and just be professional too. But as Eric said, there's even a recommendation section, and things like that there. So I mean, someone can view a lot of those things to kind of weed through that. now to be more efficient. So I think it's definitely something that's worth spending, you know, a good amount of time on. And a lot of times the first or second point of reference that some people will see too. So actually, one other question, a couple other questions here that we have as well is that, what about, I had someone ask a little bit about kind of career coaching, so to speak. So I know, as an example, Kathleen, I'd like you to comment on this first. Like, we know the GEM program pairs with the Radium Staffing, the Van Cleve sisters, you know, they're great. They are like 4th, 5th generation energy professionals. And they do a lot of great work with that. Is there any career coaching or anything like that that you're familiar with for those that are looking to specifically transition energy sectors, or maybe kind of a starting place for someone there?
I don't know anything specific off the top of my head. When I was meeting with some of the students in this cohort earlier this spring, winter, whatever season we're in at the time, one of the things that I talked to a lot of people about was their resume, and having somebody, you know, getting some specific resume coaching. And I think that's a really important thing. Again, if you're thinking about how you frame your skills and how you support those skills with the experience you have rather than the other way around, I think I would highly recommend that you get somebody outside, somebody, you know, even if you're not applying for a job within a specific company, have somebody, as you're networking with people, have somebody take a look at your resume and say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. Somebody who isn't as familiar with your career necessarily, even some of your personal connections who may not know, you know, I'm not sure any of my family actually understands what it is that I do, so having them look at it.
Mine still doesn't either, it's okay.
I think on that side of things, though, I mean, again, these are the things that your LinkedIn page, your resume, the things that outside people are going to be looking at, getting some feedback specifically on those pieces, I think is going to be really valuable from the sort of coaching standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just something that I just realized or kind of thought about too is that, let's be honest, I know when I first did it too with, you know, having my resume and LinkedIn profile, I copied one to the other. And considering, right, that's about how a lot of people kind of look up at different things like that now too, I think it becomes even twice as important on your resume, because let's face it, chances are someone's resume and LinkedIn profile is pretty similar. So just having someone, maybe a fresh kind of face, look at it to understand how these different things translate and how it comes off, because just like anything else, it's like a game of telephone, right? You can think that your message is saying something on there, you know, through your lens and through how you view things, but once you get to 7, 8, 9 different people, it's completely different. So I think that's a great point. You know, with that. And actually another question here for both of you too is actually just kind of forecasting the upcoming economy with the job market. And obviously none of us are like, you know, Nostradamus of the energy realm or anything like that. And we're still at the very, you know, beginning stages of an uncertain time on many levels. But I guess kind of forecasting the upcoming economy with the job market, besides just maybe looking at other positions within your company or maybe learning better ways to work remotely. Is there, I guess, just kind of any other advice along that realm that you'd give, or anything that you kind of foresee coming that we can maybe be proactive versus reactive in? Kathleen, why don't you go first, then Eric, we'll hear what you have to say about it.
You know, I think the sort of these immediate next 6 months are really uncertain, and I'm not going to pretend to be able to predict anything in that space. But I think when you get a little bit further out, when you're looking at the next 5 to 10 years, the energy sector is going to be really, really exciting, because there's a ton of change. I think as you're looking at the electrification of more sectors, as you're looking at the generation mix shifting, as you're looking at finding different ways to get to that last 20%, as Eric was talking about before, there is so much. There's so much just changing, and it is changing so fast. I mean, in the utility sector alone, the technology and the market change